Hello there. Obviously, the chaos doesn't end. Liz Truss' government is on the mend. Within a few days, she experienced the second change in the cabinet, and there's also some rumbling in the parliamentary group. After the British Prime Minister Truss had already replaced her Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Home Secretary also left. There's chaos in Westminster, the cabinet shows signs of dissolution, and then there was even an uproar in the lower house. During Parliament's question time at noon, Prime Minister Liz Truss hurled the slogan at the opposition's calls for her resignations that she was a fighter, not a quitter. Well, the situation seemed to have calmed down after Truss had triggered financial chaos with planned tax cuts and had to make a 180-degree U-turn with the newly appointed Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt at the beginning of the week. But then in the afternoon on Wednesday, there was a new irritation: the sudden resignation of Home Secretary Swella Braverman. In her letter of resignation, Braverman stated that she had sent government papers through a private email account and she took responsibility for breaking the rules. And she further wrote, "Pretending we didn't make any mistakes, moving on as if not everyone could see we made them, and hoping things magically turn out all right isn't serious politics. I've made a mistake, I take responsibility, I step down." It's a jab at Truss, who had been criticized for not resigning herself over the tax plan fiasco, but sacrificing her finance minister. In the second part of the letter, however, Braverman openly shot at Truss. She was concerned about the government's direction. Important promises had been broken, and the manifesto had been abandoned. That's the party election program. Former Attorney General Swella Braverman is on the far right of the Conservative Party and advocates for a tougher crackdown on deportations. At the Conservative Party conference in early October, she raved that she dreamed of a cover photo on the Conservative Daily Telegraph with the first government-organized deportation flight to Rwanda. That is what Braverman had rented this week, that they were not dealing with a coalition, that they were dealing with a coalition of chaos, with Guardian reading, tofu eating, woke ratey. And behind the scenes, there is said to have been a dispute between Truss and Braverman about immigration. Truss needs outside labor for her growth program, which probably couldn't be done with Braverman. British Prime Minister Liz Truss has obviously come under further pressure in a chaotic vote in the House of Commons following the resignation of Home Secretary Swella Braverman. In the vote on Wednesday evening to lift the ban on fracking, the parliamentary group leadership of the ruling Tories apparently put massive pressure on their own MPs. The government won the vote, but reports of resignations at the top of the group caused a stir. Truss is running for office after she unleashed financial chaos with planned tax cuts and had to do a lot of U-turns. As I said, Truss fired Kwasi Kwarteng just on Friday and replaced him with former Secretary of State and Health Jeremy Hunt. A Conservative MP spoke of chaos in the House of Commons after the recent vote, calling it inexcusable and an absolute disgrace. "Discipline is breaking down," another Tory MP told Reuters. "I cannot go on like this," he says. And Sir Charles Walker, MP for Broxburn, told the BBC, "To be perfectly honest, this whole affair is inexcusable. It's a pathetic reflection of the Conservative Parliamentary Party at all levels and a very poor reflection of government." British media reports said that the chief whip responsible for group discipline and her deputy had resigned in protest and an abrupt departure from the uniform voting behavior of Tory MPs initially demanded by the government. Downing Street was finally forced to take the unusual step late in the evening with a statement clarifying that the two whips were still in office. Opposition Labour MP Chris Bryant called for an official inquiry after the vote. Before the vote, he saw that Tory MPs in Parliament had been massively harassed and pressured, Bryant said. And Braverman, known as a domestic political hardliner, had previously justified her resignation in a letter by saying that she had used her private email address And so she got away from that vote at the top banks, at least. At the same time, she really did have serious concerns about Truss and her policies. But who doesn't at the moment? Who doesn't? The people that are not concerned about that policy are the people with the serious problems now, because everybody on a healthy mind must be concerned like hell at the moment. But as I said, the former interior minister belongs to the extreme right wing of the party, and so yeah, reason is not the reason for the whole trouble we are going through right now, I guess, because she is one of those with the deportation plans. I told you that. But a replacement for Braverman has already been found, as we hear. The new Home Secretary is to be former Transport Secretary Grant Shapps. That was announced by Downing Street on Wednesday as well, of course in the evening, and they did that via the Twitter news service. Truss lost the second cabinet member within a few days with this. Shapps had supported Truss rival Rishi Sunak in the intra-party election campaign to succeed ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He was previously Transport Secretary in Boris Johnson's cabinet. He is considered an experienced minister and a convincing communicator, but not a real friend of Truss. Both Shapps and Hunt belong to the more moderate part of the Tory party. Their appointment is therefore seen as an attempt by Truss, who has come, I cannot repeat that often enough, under enormous pressure, to unite larger parts of the party behind them. According to polls, the Conservatives are about 30 percentage points behind the opposition Labour Party at the moment. At the research institute YouGov, Truss is the most unpopular head of government since those surveys ever began. In this autumn of manifold dangers and serious problems, Britain affords Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The successor to the failed Boris Johnson in the highest party in government office has had 2 ministerial departures after just 6 weeks, as I said. And I also have to repeat that in the videos because it's unusual. And against the advice of all serious experts, driven only by ideological blindness and unlimited arrogance, Truss and her close companion Kwasi Kwarteng, while he still was finance minister, plunged the world's 6th largest economy into an economic experiment that everybody told them before it's not working. A sweeping package of debt-financed tax cuts totaling £45 billion turned financial markets against the island. The pound plummeted, home builder lending rates soared, billion-dollar pension funds wobbled alarmingly. And according to the Statistics Office, ONS, the national debt is already 102.6% and the trend is rising. The UK is significantly more dependent on foreign donors than other countries in the G7 group and is therefore exposed to the financial markets. The hard-hit Brits have to pay for the consequences through more expensive imports, higher interest rates on home loans, and the reduced scope for urgently needed investments in state infrastructure. And you might have seen my video on the NHS recently. Truss fired Kwarteng and cancelled all tax cuts, or better, Hunt did this. But elsewhere, however, the illogical course continues undeterred. In response to a wave of strikes announced for railways and dock workers, in schools and hospitals, Truss is presenting a new law to Parliament to curtail trade union rights. In the dispute over the status of Northern Ireland, the government is still planning a clear breach of the internationally binding EU exit agreement. The British were far too convinced of their own importance in the past, and other governments have also pursued fatal economic and financial policies. But Truss represents the pinnacle of incompetence and at the same time the logical consequence of her party's drifting into isolation and ideological obstinacy. 6 years after the serious strategic mistakes of leaving the EU, the Tories are unimaginative and drained of staff. When the Brits finally wake up from their Brexit fever dream, they are in for a painful awakening. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.